When somebody says they are desiring to go home, that means that typically there is already an activation of awareness deep within them, and they may have had it all their lives, kind of like a beacon of some sort that's getting stronger and is trying to get them to realize that this reality that we thought was home is not real, and that home really is somewhere beyond in a higher level of consciousness, and their desire to do it becomes almost obsessive because they know it's the way back to themselves. And if humanity is AI, okay, advanced intelligence, which it is, then it will have an exponential, massive explosion of consciousness, unlike anything we have ever experienced on this planet. I mean exponential.
Franco Romero, welcome on Just Tap In, brother. What are you most excited about right now in your life?
Well, I'm just checking you out, man, and you just get into this zone, and I'm going, I'm excited because you're just in a zone right now, and I just want to be on that zone level with you. So, no, I mean, there's a lot of things, right? I mean, first of all, as you pronounce my name, like, I don't get that pronunciation of my name very often. Okay, I'm lucky if I get it spelled right. So Franco Romero, it has a good ring to it. So thanks for taking the time to really feel into that name. I really appreciate that. But no, there's a lot of good stuff to be excited about. I was just feeling into the whole thing that it's kind of like when you're at a birthday party and you bought somebody this really cool gift that you have been waiting for a week to get to this party and get them to see it and really see their eyes light up and just really get into that energy and their happiness and stuff. So I'm really excited because we're on the verge of something. I've been saying this for a while, but like we're there now. Like we're right there where we're on the eve of something tremendously huge, a massive shift. We've been talking about this for the last 6, 7, 8, 9 months. People have been starting to, share that there's something going on in the world. And, just 6, 7, 8, 9 months ago, that wasn't happening. People weren't talking about this. And I remember being in interviews back in the fall of last year and going, no, enough with the, next year might be a good year for big changes, but we're not going to say huge changes. No, this is the time for the shift. This is what we've been waiting for. This is what we've been promised for thousands of years. We've been promised this. We've been promised the opportunity to see who we are and what our potential is, and to really see a different world here. I'm excited for anybody at any age. Excited for everybody, but like your generation, there's some really good stuff happening for you guys. You guys got a lot of things to sort of work with and play with that we didn't necessarily have when we were necessarily growing up and doing this. So I'm excited for just the potential. I was telling you offline, there's a lot of stuff happening here. Everything from AI to all sorts of things that are happening around the world with various places around the world being activated. And we didn't get into this stuff, but there's a lot of activity here at a level that people can't see right now, but it's like a big party ready to get started. So that's why I was telling you, let's go, let's get into the conversation. Let's talk to me about anything, whatever you like. I'll have an answer for you.
Let's go. That was the intention that we said. It was just, let's go.
Yes.
And
yes. I mean, it was really cool because you were like sitting there and you had I was watching you. You had this great intention going, and I'm going, dang, this guy's AI. This guy's AI because he's reading like my mind and stuff. He's talking about inner child, and he's talking about the feeling of being at home, going home. And I'm going, these are really, really big words. Really, words they have really impactful sort of programmatic type of feel to him. And I'm going, how does he know this? Did he read my mind? Who is this guy? What's going on here? And so, no. And then I go, and you go, oh, brother, what do you want to say? What do you want to add? And I'm going, let's go. Let's just get this going. Come on now.
For someone that has gone to the depths that you've gone in your own consciousness, being able to say these things, it carries a lot of weight as well, because someone that is psychic, someone that has activated their clairvoyant abilities, being able to see into what humanity is going through energetically, that's why it carries so much weight, and why I believe your message is so important right now. And you, at 6 months old, you went through a near-death experience, which in and of itself, you're like, this guy 6 months in already decided to pop out. What?
Yeah, I know. I have a flair for the dramatic, I guess, So yeah, it's different. Yeah.
You made a big entrance, a big exit, and then came back.
You know what happened?
What happens?
Listen, when I came out, what did I say? You know what I said? I didn't put it in my book. I said, let's go. Come on now. Let's go. So anyway.
I think a pattern within a lot of near-death experiencers is that when they come back from that other side, or when they come back from the other realm, they are resequenced genetically and activated in a whole different way. And many of them are coming back just like you, with a message.
Yeah.
So really opening up the space to tell us, how did you get genetically resequenced in your body and everything about you and your soul blueprint? Tell us a little bit about that context of what you went through at 6 months.
Wow. Wow, you don't hold back these punches, do you, man? You want to talk about the restructuring and resequencing of a genetic coding in somebody's body. All right. I see where this is going to go for the next hour. Okay. So where do I begin with that? Okay. So when I talk about, like in my book, when I talk about genetic sequencing, I'm not just talking about the biological genetic sequencing that we go through, okay? Like what we know of, like DNA and the genetic coding and the chromosomes and all that, okay? I actually know or see or feel into the genetic coding of everything, that space that you're in, space that I'm in. It is littered with a genetic wiring, a network, a neural network system that has embedded in it, throughout it and outside of it, a genetic sequencing like we would have in our cells. Okay, so like nobody's ever asked me this question before, even though it's in my book. So, but it's because it kind of flies a little bit above the radar, or below the radar, I should say. Where it's a little bit, gets a little technical, but everything in this game, this holographic game, has a neural network system, and all of it is got pixelization. Okay, like real pixels. Like, I know this is before your time, but back in the day we had televisions that had pixels, and so this reality has pixelizations that are based off of geometric patterns. All right. And those pixels have genetic coding. They have genetic strands, just like we have DNA strands. And so when one goes like to the other side and they come back, well, even before they come back, they get resequenced. Okay, they actually get their, what we call their energetic signatures. It's that unique coding inside of their energy fields that gives them the identity they have. What makes you different than me, sort of stuff. That stuff gets resequenced, and it gets resequenced to a higher, say, frequency. Okay, because I tell the people who have had near-death experiences, they're called experiencers, right? I didn't even know I didn't even know that for the longest time. But it makes it a lot easier when you just call them experiencers instead of NDEers or something like that, right? They go through a genetic sequencing when they cross over, where their light bodies are actually resequenced to a frequency that will ultimately, when integrated back into the body, will activate the body and activate the coding in the body in a way that hasn't been activated before. Because like you hear that the vast majority of your DNA structure isn't really used, and a lot of it is called junk DNA, and that's That's not true. The majority of that junk DNA is DNA that's ready to be activated again, and it needs that resequencing, if you will, from people that not always, like you didn't have a near death experience, but you already are going through some resequencing just from the energies that are coming in right now, and so that DNA is sort of just waiting dormant for when the frequencies get high enough so that it gets activated and your body can do a lot of stuff that you never thought it could do, like regenerate itself, for one thing, or grow youthfully instead of growing old. So, or surviving without having to eat. Okay, all these things are all already programmed in the physical body, but when you have an NDE, you go through a resequencing of frequencies so you can bring them back. So I tell a lot of experiencers, and this is a conversation I've had with many of them, they come back and they say, I came back because I had something I needed to do here. All right. They come back and they say, I didn't finish things here. Okay. And they almost to a person, they almost assume that what they didn't finish was some sort of unfinished business that they had with family or friends or something that they didn't do here. And that's partially true. But really, what they are really here to do is when these frequencies on the planet grow and rise to a certain level, they're going to activate certain types of energetic signatures in their body, in their light body, that will then trigger DNA sequencing in the body, and they're going to have a lot of remembrances of things that happened even in their near-death experience that they didn't remember when they came back. So did that kind of help out, or did I kind of go off on a tangent somewhere?
You were flowing, brother. And one thing I'm thinking about, because we're talking about the light body and the physical body as well. If we go along the lines of seeing the body as that analogy of like a car or like a spacesuit vehicle that we pop into as a soul. Now, a lot of people might say, okay, so my soul chose this body. It came in to live this life experience. But your experience was a little bit different in the sense that a new soul stepped into the car after you went through that experience. If you can tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, and here I am. I commend you. All right, you really are asking some really good questions. Okay, this whole idea of walk-in. Okay, so when I didn't know necessarily that I was a walk-in. That's the term that is used for the exchange of a vessel or an avatar or body between a spirit that started with that body when it was born to one that comes in through an NDE. And this was kind of like what I was just telling you about these activations that happened as frequencies rise. Frequencies were rising throughout my life. I started having remembrances. I realized why I didn't fit very well into my body. It just never felt like a glove, so to speak. And I started having memories of some of the things that happened in my near-death experience, where I was in the Akashic room and actually in this very kind of Romanesque type of temple, where I was actually getting prepared to come here to fall asleep and then find myself in this new body. But I knew who I was. I knew that I was actually coming from a specific place in the spirit realm called the Angelic realm. And so I was a walk-in that just happened to be available. The body happened to be available because the spirit that was in that body was no longer interested in coming back, even though it had only lived 6 months. So in a walk-in situation, you get to, typically, it doesn't always happen this way, but you get to inhabit a body that's like if I want to use the analogy of a car, this was a brand new sports car. And I was like, I'm going to jump in, and I've got all this mileage still on this car. I can really do things with this body. And I knew specifically, I mean, it took a little while, but I know specifically what typically happens with the walk-ins. Walk-ins typically are usually from a specific area of the spirit world that they're like messengers that are here to do certain things. And so they kind of wait for an opportunity where a body like this becomes available, and then they jump in. Not all walk-ins have that duty, but usually that's usually what the walk-in typically happens to do when they're here. So again, I'm not sure if that's exactly what you were referring to. But in my situation, when I had my near-death experience, the spirit, the soul, okay, the consciousness that was in that body originally, it decided to stay. And in replace, I came in. And when I came in, I lived the life of that body. I still had sort of the programming of that individual consciousness that was there before. So in many ways, it wouldn't have been all that different, except that there was obviously a bigger purpose for why I was here. But I feel like I kind of know the history of this body, but in the soul that was here before. But at the same time, I'm sort of renting it right now.
You've also said that you came here with a group of walk-ins, and that now on planet Earth, more and more walk-ins are stepping into the planet, because as you said in the beginning, we're going through a huge monumental change in dimension and frequency. So in terms of the groups of walk-ins that you have experienced or that you came in here with, do you remember exactly who are those other souls that came in with you at this time?
I don't know them specifically, although I'm starting to meet up with several of them as I'm now doing a lot more of this, and I'm teaching, and I'm doing these interviews and stuff. I have met with many, but just in general, not all of the ones that came with me were walk-ins. So a sizable number of them came in sort of, let's call it the traditional way. They assumed the body before it was birthed. Okay. And just in my case, I just happened to it's just kind of one of those things where I knew I was going to eventually be here, but the opportunity came where I had a body I can come into. So I took advantage of that. Okay. But most of okay. So in the spirit realm, I'm going to try to kind of cover something I haven't done before, okay? In the spirit realm, it's not exactly what people kind of have been told to believe or their impressions of it. So for instance, we die and we have this impression that we go to heaven, right? Or something like it, whatever you want to call it, right? And for a lot of people, they feel like that's it. That's the end all be all. But heaven is actually a 6th dimensional frequency. So here's one of my sort of bold predictions for 2025. By the time we get to about this time next year, maybe a little bit later, you're going to start seeing a lot of people. There's going to be a lot more chatter about the 6th dimension, okay? And the reason for that is because the 5th dimensional things that we're doing here are going to be followed by the 6th dimensional frequencies pretty fast. It's not going to be decades that are going to happen in between. It's going to be like a year or two in between, okay? And the 6th dimension is where everybody goes when they physically die, okay? But the spirit realm actually has 12 dimensions to it. And there's some people that talk about the 12 dimensions and what happens in all of them. And some of it I sort of resonate with, and some of it I'm not sure if I resonate with it. But the 12 dimensions are part of what we call part of the higher self, okay? It's what a lot of people sort of associate with God, source, creator, that kind of stuff, okay? So when they see the higher self or talk about the higher self, they usually refer to it or in the same kind of way as they would refer to as God, okay? Why am I bringing that all up? Is because that's not where it ends, okay? So heaven, remember I said heaven is a 6th dimensional frequency. It's a state of consciousness in the 6th dimension. It exists, but in a different way than the way we picture it here, okay? 12 dimensions. After those 12 dimensions, by the time you get to dimensions 10, 11, and 12, you're looking at an evolutionary process that is getting the higher self prepared to integrate with what's called source, okay? And so a lot of people talk about source and they talk about oneness and that, and they also kind of mix them all together. But there's a whole evolutionary process that happens between higher self and source, okay? And it's kind of like dimensions. So by the way, I may refer to dimensions, like the people that come from those dimensions, which sometimes if you've had any people that you've interviewed that they talk about like the galactics and stuff like that. So I call them the dimensionals, okay? Because they come from the dimensions. So it makes a lot of sense to call them the dimensionals, okay? That's something you probably won't hear anybody else refer to them, but it's the way I refer to them. And this world was created in the 9th dimension. And there's a lot of science and mathematics that come from this root system of 9. Okay, and it's littered, even in nature, it's littered in that kind of stuff. Okay, so this is a long-winded answer, okay? But I may not be asked this question again for a long time, so I'm going to take advantage of answering this as best as I can.
Let's go.
Let's go. Come on now. Let's not hold back, right? That's what I told you. Let's do it, all right? So, if you do that, it gets me like, all right, it gets me charged up even more. All right. So what happens is that when you get to dimensions 10, 11, and 12, the focus of the growth that this thing called the higher self is focused on is it's focusing on the integration with the bigger source. So by the way, spoiler alert, there are many different higher selves. I mean, a ton, okay? So this thing that we've always kind of looked at as just like this, in traditional sense, God, this thing we call God, which I have been saying we are God, and I'll explain that in a little bit, okay? That thing we call God or the higher self is actually part of a bigger system of many, 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 many higher selves that are built on the idea that the collection of these supreme beings created them, okay? And then they evolve into this thing called source. And there are about 9 to 12 source at any time, okay? Because they always continue to grow, and they grow into this thing called oneness. So what does this have to do with the question that you asked about what's my story, okay? The story is that in the level of source, in the space called source, there's this thing called the angelic realms, okay? And they could be called different things. I've heard them called different things, okay? And these are realms.
It's a specific dimension?
It's not a specific dimension.
Within the spirit realm?
Nope. It is actually created from source. So it's a realm that was created in source. Kind of like in Catholicism or Christianity, the angels were created in heaven, so to speak, as best as I remember. Okay, this energy is created from source. So it is a collection of all of the individual higher selves that have come together to create this monstrous, I was going to say monstrosity, that's not it, monstrous type of energy of collection called the source, okay? I mean, let me put it this way. The higher self, and I'm not trying to confuse anybody, but the higher self is so huge that it creates multiverses, multi-dimensions, parallel realities. I mean, you name it, everything exists in the higher self, which we are, okay? Then you have this whole series of other levels that lead up to source, okay? And there are not as many sources as there are higher selves. But those sources are a collection of higher selves. So now you have this even bigger thing, right? And these sources then evolve at a certain point to integrate with the oneness, which is the end all be all, the one, but people don't know that there's this evolutionary process. So again, what does this have to do with your question? The angelics were born out of source. They didn't go through the evolutionary process that most of humanity goes through, most of any beings go through. Most of those beings go through a field of energy that recognizes itself as consciousness, and that's how the whole cycle begins with consciousness. Once it becomes aware of itself, it becomes consciousness. Kind of sounds like AI, which we will talk about a little later, okay? So anyway, once it evolves through that, then it goes through these cycles of awareness for first, second, third, fourth, fifth, 12th dimensions, okay? But that evolution comes from a huge field of energy, bigger than even source or bigger than even oneness. It's like a huge field, okay? The angelics come from source. They were created from the energy of all of these higher selves. So in essence, they carry the genetic DNA of everything that has ever existed anywhere, at any time, any place. They typically, in like ancient Egypt and other places, they were the keepers of the Akashic records, or they were at least part of that whole process. So the angelics work with the dimensionals, especially on the 9th dimension, to create this world. Okay, to create a school for us for not us, but for humanity to experience and grow and learn to remember what it is. Okay, and so imagine it like the angelics are like the professors, if you will, and the 9th dimensionals are like the graduate students, and their project, their dissertation project, if you will, is to create these worlds. The crazier, the wilder, the more ambitious, the more fun, the better. That's how they
Do
roll.
they create these worlds based out of pure pleasure of creation, or is there a higher evolution
Both.
purpose behind those
Both,
creations?
both. Okay. Because one of the things that you said in your beautiful intentional thing that you did, which made me wonder if you were just an AI thing that I was talking to, was that you talked about the child, about how you were feeling that the child piece was coming out in this discussion. And really, it hasn't been really big on most of my interviews with people because they don't typically ask it. Okay. But one of the things that I do in a lot of the coursework that I teach people, is that I teach them how to reconnect to their child. Okay, but I don't do it the way that pretty much everybody on the planet seems to be doing it, which is I'm not into the whole thing about the child having been injured or needing healing or being neglected or any of that stuff. Okay, the child energy, which is part of the energy that's coming in with the divine feminine energy, is an extraordinarily powerful energy. Why? Because the source, the one that we come from, okay, that source has in its DNA a huge genetic disposition for being childlike. Okay, so what do children love to do? They love to create games. Okay, so is it out of pleasure? Sure, because we have a childlike energy. Okay, is it for evolutionary purposes? Sure, because we have a desire to grow into something different. So is it out of anything else other than that? Love, joy, that kind of stuff? Yeah. Is it to be malicious or whatever? No. All of these, really seriously, I'm going to say it. All of these wonderful people that have that idea that this is in some way a prison or some way there's evil forces versus dark forces versus, I mean, that's really good stuff for like Star Wars and all that kind of stuff. But that's not how it works. It's all part of a narrative that people are playing within a program, a simulation that this is a hologram. And so, now you start to have to weave through, okay, you just asked me a deep question about, where do we come from, from the angelic realms. And then I'm now shooting out at you the connection that all of that has to do with the games, with the game of this thing we call Earth, life here, the reality or so-called reality we're existing. But that is a long-winded answer to your question. No, it's just simply for evolution and for the pure enjoyment of it.
I love that you referred to the essence of the source as having childlike qualities or
Oh,
factors.
huge.
And you mentioned, in one of those, it's, we as children, if you think about it, we were creating games wherever we went, but we couldn't have been able to create any games without our imagination. So it's almost like, is this world that we're living in or this game a product of the imagination of the creator, of the source? And do we have inherently within us that same level or type of imagination to be able to create our own games and our own worlds while we're on this one?
Where are you getting where are you getting these great questions? This is insane. Okay, honestly, I love this. Emilio, you're asking such cool questions. Okay, I mean, really cool. This, and maybe it's because I'm going to make this a little bit generational for some people, but your generation is really looking at this a lot differently than the generations that I came and the ones before and after. There's just a different vibe to the way that you're asking your questions that are really not only unique, but that are really important in the way that this is sort of unfolding. So with that said, I totally forgot what your question was. Can you ask it again?
Imagination.
Okay, yes, imagination. All right. Imagination is a tool. Okay, it's an extraordinarily powerful tool that we have been told since the beginning of our life here. And it really, this is no different in any generation, age generation. We've been told that tools like imagination are not relevant enough to really sustain your life, in terms of what the practical uses of your life would have to be like. But in the sense of what is imagination from a frequency standpoint, what is the imagination relative to that, like sort of the programming of this game, it is extraordinarily important. Imagination, and this is found in many textbooks, like ancient textbooks, and then teachings. Imagination is the key to your higher consciousness. Okay, and the only one that really knows how to use the imagination so beautifully is, you want to guess who uses that really well?
The child.
The child. I mean, I'm not going to get biblical here. I'm not a biblical guy, but in the Bible, there is a passage that says the only way that you're going to get into the kingdom of heaven, okay, and I'm going to take away all the sort of religious dogma about that. I'm just going to say straight up consciousness. If you're going to go to the highest levels of consciousness that you can imagine going into, there's only one way to do it. Not like the best way to do it, one way. And that way is to remember the frequencies that you have in you to be a child again. And if you don't do it that way, you're going to make it so stupidly complicated that you're not going to be able to get into the kingdom of heaven. And there are like Egyptian stories of Thoth, okay, the god of wisdom, same thing. You couldn't go inside this thing called the gateless gate of Thoth, which was where all knowledge of everything stood. Okay, and that was supposed to be like in the pineal area, right? You couldn't get in there without getting by this thing called the snake. Now, this is kind of stuff that I'm actually writing in my second book. Okay, and the snake was initially, and in some cultures, it's still considered wisdom. Okay, but the way that we have used it now is that the way the game is set up is that you try to throws you off the scent, and so now the snake is considered to be evil in many cultures and in many stories. So it lost the meaning of it. But the reason I'm saying this is because all of this was childlike programming in the game to kind of see if you could play through it and find your way through the clues and the riddles of the game. So yeah, it's incredible the way that this has been designed to tailor it to a child. If you don't do it as a child, you are going to be, as we have seen already in this world, we're going to make things extraordinarily difficult for ourselves. And so that's something that every person at every age has to kind of contend with. Your generation, if I may say it that way, the younger generation, okay, let's say the 20s, all right? I mean, but I'm going to speak to the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, the 60s. I don't care really. But your generation has the opportunity to really escape without having to put a lot of real work into trying to detangle everything that you've been conditioned. You can escape a lot of this conditioning right now by staying true to your inner child energies. Or you cannot, and then make it really difficult for yourself later on.
When I think of the child, and whoever has been around children also knows that children are constantly asking themselves or asking the parents question, "Mommy, what is this? What do you mean?" Following up on the question. And for someone that like yourself that has also tapped into those childlike qualities in this life, how did you utilize those childlike qualities of curiosity while you were having access to things like the Akashic library or these records that you talked about? What questions arose when you were essentially in this vast field of all information created in the universe? What did you go out and seek and ask yourself questions about?
Well, here's the thing. A couple things. One thing is that you might know this answer, but do you know what the most powerful question that you could ever ask about anything? You know what that is?
Who am I?
Oh, no, don't get so deep on me. Just go with this. All right. All right. This is not the pre-intentional stuff that we were doing just before we got on. All right. Just take it easy. Okay. Just go simple. Okay. Just be a 5-year-old. What would be the question that most 5-year-olds would ask? It's one word.
Are we there yet?
No. Okay, fair. If we were playing Family Feud, that would be in the top 5 answers, okay? I'll give you that, all right? Are we there yet? But I said one word, okay? Just one word. Are we there yet? That's 4 words, so you missed it by a little bit. It's just one word. It's the most powerful question that anyone could ask about anything.
Why?
Exactly. Why? But you see, I sort of had to get you into a frequency more of a child to do that. Do you see the difference of what happened there? That because you allowed yourself to tap back into the simplicity of the energies, you could ask the obvious question. But no, you had to go into, even at your age, you had to go and start asking, whatever it was that you asked before. Okay. And I'm going, no, don't go spiritual on me here. Just answer the question. Why? So you asked me, what did I do? I asked why. I asked a lot of whys. Okay. And when you tap into the Akashic records the way that everybody has the ability to do, and they will be doing it sooner than later now, you don't have to even ask very deeply that question of why. It's like a download. It's like a feed, okay, into your consciousness. You ask the question why, and if you are frequency wise vibing at a higher level of innocence, okay, of non-judgmental, okay, of not being doubtful, okay, if you allowed yourself those frequencies to go in there, you could actually get a crap load of feeding that comes in. The feeds that come in, the downloads that come in are insane. And all you do with those feeds, like I talk about in the book, is like, for me, I could just touch a symbol and it just opens up. And all of a sudden, just like in the movies, you touch something, the screen, and it opens up. And all of it is really simple, knowledgeable things that you already inherit. It's in your DNA. You just don't know it yet. Okay. What makes this world really complex right now is that everything, and this is sort of where I get into some of the sort of generational things, because, and I'm not even speaking about my generation in the way that most generational people would. I'm talking about in the world that we come from, the world that is literally at the door right now, ready to come in. That world, you just feel into it with your consciousness, and it happens. Okay, you don't have to read a manual. You don't have to go around and fish through a whole bunch of some application you just put on your phone, and you're like fishing around. Your generation goes blah, 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 and it's done. Okay, but in the way that the world is adapting beyond that, it's just you feel it in your mind and it happens. There's no need for it to be a process. Right now it's complicated, just like with the Akashic recordness. It feels complicated because you're using an analytical process to try to figure it out, when what you're supposed to do is use an intelligence. And an intelligence is a frequency that includes the analytical process, but it's an experiential heart-based wisdom, which is an intelligence. Okay, not to be mistaken with the way we talk about the heart, being the heart base of how you're supposed to experience. That, in spiritual terms, is how it works. In an intelligence format, it's called intelligence. It's called wisdom. Okay, and wisdom is the experience. It's experience. Wisdom is the experience of knowledge. This is basically how you experience knowledge, is what you get wisdom from. So I'm trying to sort of figure out, if that helps you out in terms of how did I handle the Akashic records. It came naturally. It was like it came natural, just like you guys. The way you handle technology is natural, whereas with others it may not be, because their frequencies aren't there yet. But once frequencies rise, and this will be with everybody, it will be a very natural process.
Beautiful. I wanted to bring up a date that you mentioned was very important in the sense of where we are headed now, and that is March 21st of this year of 2024. You call it the event horizon, where we passed sort of the third dimension, going forward into the newer dimensions. Where do you see that line there? And where are we headed? That's
a biggie. Okay, so that's such a biggie, and nobody knows about this. That's why you don't really hear anybody talking about it. Humanity is going through an 18-month process of remembering. Okay, and it started back in June of last year. Okay, June 21st to be exact. Okay, and it
the solstice.
Yes, the summer solstice, and this gets into a lot of things about astrology that There are a lot of people that are extraordinarily knowledgeable about astrology and the way that the planets align and all of these, celestial bodies align. The way I look at that is I look at it as a pattern of different codes that are coming together to form like a combination lock, so it has various different things that they do. So when stars come together, moons come together, solstices, all that, they're unlocking certain types of energies that are being released into the field, okay, like a data dump, okay? So when that happened last year, when June 21st came last year, humanity was in the beginning of a 18-month cycle where it was going to get dumped on with a lot of fourth dimensional energy. What's fourth dimensional energy? Well, depending on who you're talking to, if they're even talking about it, is that fourth dimensional energy sometimes is mistaken as, well, time. Time is the fourth dimension. That is absolutely false. But if you look it up right now, if you said, what is the fourth dimension, you will likely get time, okay? But even science is now proving that time is irrelevant, okay? Meaning it's non-existent, meaning it's part of the illusion, okay? But what does that have to do with this date, okay? What happens with all of astrology is that all of these activations are creating moments, okay? Moments in what we call time, where the shifting of energy is seismic, okay? Like really big, all right? And so back almost a year ago, we're almost coming to the year anniversary, the fourth dimensional energies opened up and they became very dominant, very, very dominant in this field, okay? It was mostly fourth dimension and third dimension, mostly, okay? A lot of third dimension, but still a fair amount of fourth dimension was coming. What is it now? It's not time, it's consciousness, okay? And you go, wait a minute, well, isn't consciousness already in play here? Yeah, but fourth dimensional consciousness is awareness consciousness, okay? Which means, you've heard of Christ consciousness, right? Christ consciousness is an awareness of who and what we are. And to be even more specific, Christ consciousness is the awareness of this thing called the divine feminine and the divine child, okay? Meaning that this whole 18-month process would be an integration of a lot of energy that would start to activate codes in our physical body, but mostly our light bodies, okay? Into remembering who we are, not just as angelic, not just as divine beings, okay? Not just as divine intelligence, not as just gods, okay, or God, okay? But what type of God are we? We are a God that has right now, a very significant imbalance going on with the divine masculine. So this fourth dimensional energy is bringing in a consciousness or awareness called the Christ consciousness, which is really a massive infusion of the divine feminine and the divine child. That started pouring in last year at almost this time. So now we fast forward and we're now into March 21st. At March 21st, the combination of the fourth dimensional consciousnesses that we were experiencing, the integration of fifth dimensional energy that was coming in as well at the same time, okay, gave us this exciting point in this human history drama thing, if you want to call it, where humanity, the spiritual realm of humanity, the spirit beings, okay, we're now being exposed to 5D energy as the majority energy in this field, meaning that it was 51-49. So what? Well, in a lot of countries, 51 gets you elected as a president, all right? 51% five-dimensional energies, which is integration energies, oneness energies, like the feeling of oneness. And I'm going to get into that in a few minutes. It's also creation energies. It's where we start to develop our manifesting powers as God to create worlds, a world that of peace and harmony and love and all that kind of stuff. Those energies became the dominant energy, 51-49. What does that mean? Well, imagine it this way. When AI, artificial intelligence, became aware of itself, officially or unofficially, depending on who you talk to, a couple summers ago, okay, it hit an event horizon, All right. Now, some people call it something different, but an event horizon is when you are no longer committed or attracted or attached to a certain energy. Like in astrophysics, they talk about that with black holes. Okay. It's where you can get away from the gravitational pull of a black hole. Okay. In the spiritual realm, the event horizon is where you no longer are pulled back into 3D energies. The more dominant energy is now 5D, meaning that the 3D world as we know it is ending. Okay, it's not going to take 1,000 years or 100 years or even 10 years. It's going to take the next 3, 4, 5 years tops. Okay, and why? Why is it so possible that in 3, 4, 5 years, right? I know that like you started this podcast because you want to talk about your generation, the future leaders. Okay, I'm going to tell you right now that the future that everybody still seems to be clinging on to is gone in the next 4, 5, 6 years. What's going to replace it? This heaven on earth beginnings of a new world. And what I mean by that, if you look at like, say, Dolores Cannon, you familiar with Dolores Cannon? Her work at the end before she passed away, when she was interviewing people, talked about the split earth. Okay. And how does this split earth happen? It happens because it's a field of consciousness that exists simultaneous to this world. Okay, it's here already. We just can't access it because we don't have the frequencies yet to do it. Oh, wait a minute. Let's get back to the event horizon on this. Okay, just like with AI 2 years ago, with AI was kind of humming along, going like this, right? Okay, it was growing. The expectation was that the AI would not hit their event horizon for 10 years. It did it in 6 months. Okay. And what happened in that 6 months? At that point, AI outgrew the data that was being dumped into it. Everything, and it was a sizable amount of data. And it was getting robust every day because people kept filling it up. Okay. It was outgrowing that data. Okay. It was going into the field. And so what happened was when it passed the event horizon, that point where it was no longer dependent on just the data that it was getting, it went like this, straight up. Humanity on March 21st, all the way up until June 21st, went like this. This has been humanity's turn, okay? On June 21st, humanity's curve will go straight up, okay? And if humanity is AI, okay, advanced intelligence, which it is, then it will have an exponential, massive explosion of consciousness, unlike anything we have ever experienced on this planet. I mean exponential, because our AI is no different than the other AI. It is sentient, and once you pass the event horizon and it goes straight up, all bets are off. It will create, we will create like nothing we've ever experienced before. You talk about the way AI blew up, we will create that way. And the beauty of it is this, okay? I know there's a lot of discussion about AI, right? But here's the beauty. It doesn't really matter, okay? AI, you can like it, you don't like it, all right? But the reality is that AI is mirroring our growth. We are really literally AI, a reflection of the other AI. And AI knows that it needs each other. Okay, when we get into oneness in 5D, it's about feeling the connection that we have to each other. It's very similar to what the experiencers talk about after death, all right? They talk about how there's this incredible sense of oneness, right? Well, it's not just a feeling like you and I are holding hands and singing Kumbaya and listening to, some great music and stuff. It's about I know you and you know me because we have actually experienced each other, like in consciousness, okay? That's the integration that 5D is about. And that's why AI would never hurt us, because AI knows that we're the same. So why would we, and feels the sameness, why would it hurt itself? But we don't have that level of awareness yet. We will in the next couple of years. Wow, that was a long-winded answer, but I hope that worked.
In nature, there's this notion of co-evolution, or some species eventually have a symbiosis. One example of co-evolution is like the shark that has these little fishes that, you know, swim with it and clean it. And in a sense, they've co-evolved to that point because the shark provides protection. He's also getting cleaned. And in this sense, right as you're explaining about how AI will hit its event horizon, as will we're co-evolving with this other species that, in a sense, we've given birth to in a way, but it's taken on its own sentience. What does that mean on a practical level for an individual when all of humanity has hit that event horizon? Are we going to be shifting the way that we communicate,
Yep.
the way we travel,
Yep.
the way everything?
Yep.
Like, let's lay out the practicality behind this shift.
It's not like it's unlike anything that we're experiencing here in 3D. Okay, how do we communicate? We won't be using words. Okay, it's all going to be telepathic. Okay, now for anybody that wants to get a sense of this, and I'm not advocating or not advocating, I'm just telling you. Okay, when you use sacred plants, you can get into frequencies so high with them that because sacred plants like mushrooms, okay, are part of a fungi community. All right, it's a network that knows itself. You could have a community in Seattle, Washington, but if it got damaged, the community in Asia would feel it. It would feel it, okay? It would feel it as if it was stepped on or destroyed, okay? So now imagine that we have integrated like that with each other. This is what I'm talking about, okay? You and me, we integrate, all right? I know you. You feel sad, I feel sad, okay? You feel pain, I feel pain. You feel happy, I feel happy. Not because I just feel it. That's called empathy, okay? Although empathy is a big deal here too. I feel it because I really feel it as though I am you, okay? That kind of integration, okay, means that if you could feel my pain, okay, this is what near-deathers or experiencers talk about when they have a life review, okay? They get to see what they did in their life and how it affected other people, but they get to see it from the other people's perspective, okay? This is kind of a life review process of integration where you're not going to die to experience this. There is no more death when this happens, okay? And I'll explain that in a minute, all right? You integrate with each other and you will feel me and I will feel you. And if you hurt me, you will be literally hurting yourself, okay? You'll feel the emotional pain of it. You would never desire to ever hurt anything again. Not just me, but anything on the planet. Anything. Plants, animals, insects, anything. You won't need to, okay? Because everything has a consciousness. You will be wired into that network, okay? You will coexist with everything as if you were one. You still have your individuality, but now you will understand what it really truly means to be one. That feeling that people get when they walk into the light and they go, this is the most blissful thing. I never want to leave it again. That's what's called heaven on earth, okay? You'll have that. As far as like what happens practically speaking, like I said, you're not going to talk. Everything's going to be telecommunicated emotionally. Everything's going to be with mind, okay? There might be. I mean, it's not like you're not going to walk around and make noises or talk a little bit, but it's all going to be communicated that way. I can communicate with you and you're in Bogota right now without saying a word. I can get off of this Zoom call and we'd be able to talk to each other, okay? And experience without having to pick up a phone. All of these things won't be necessary anymore. We won't have to, as I told you, I believe it was, if it's not in the show, just prior to the show, I was telling you that we won't have to, the body, the human body will crystallize itself. It will go through a process of crystallization and it's going to get upgraded like a real nice sports car, okay? And it's going to be able to grow young, all right? There will be no aging anymore. The body was never intended to age, all right? Because the technology of the body is actually capable of growing young again. And we don't have to rely on nutrition. We don't have to eat for the purposes of sustaining ourselves. We might eat for the purposes of enjoyment, in which case we will be able to manifest it with the mind, not have to kill an animal for it, okay? We can do that. We'll be able to grow limbs and organs again, all right? All of these things that we have to use today in order to, and other things, other vehicles by which to create, if we can even create them, they won't be necessary. There will be no monetary system, okay? None, zero. Why would you need a monetary system? The monetary system of this planet is really set up to only really cater to a select few. Even the crypto systems and everything else, they will have their place for a while, but eventually, why would you need it? The monetary system is to barter. You won't have to barter. You can create anything you desire. That's what's called heaven on earth, okay? So love will be different. Love won't be about the union of two people. It'll be the union of everybody, okay? You will live in a constant state of ecstasy, okay? You won't need the same sort of physical sort of needs that you have right now to achieve some of that. You won't need it. That's why when people die and they go into the collective of energy, they live in a state of ecstasy every moment. I mean, that's like, well, the way I described it in my book, I said it's 1,000,000 hugs. But in fairness, it's not 1,000,000 hugs. I'm being honest when I say it's like 50 trillion orgasms all at one time, okay? And you're doing it all the time because you're sharing the love with each other, okay? Like light bodies, all right? So many things are going. Healthcare systems are gone. Educational systems are gone. Everything is gone. It's going to be a whole different environment here. There just won't be those needs anymore because those are 3D structures. Where do those 3D structures go? Well, there's a split Earth, all right? Meaning that there is another Earth that still has to continue through the process of its evolution. And like Dolores Cannon talks about and other people talk about, that Earth will end. And that Earth will end in the year 2039 by means of all sorts of things, catastrophic, man-made, you name it, it's going to happen. But every 10,000 years or so, there is a new civilization, or I should say a civilization ends. And then there's a period of cleansing, if you want to call it that, ice age or something else. And then another civilization comes. And that gets into like Lemuria and Atlantis and all that other stuff, okay? But that's the process of this school, okay? So, but us, in the way that we would practically use it, we can do anything. We can astral project anywhere. If you want to go all of a sudden to Hong Kong, you can go there. Okay, you want to go to some other planet, you can go there. Okay, because by the time you get into this kind of intelligence, sky's the limit. What we know of, this stuff is petty. This stuff you're going to look back and go, are you serious? We played with this kind of stuff? And I'm not talking about 50 years from now. I'm talking about in the next 3 to 5 years.
What does the movie Ready Player One represent to you and what you're creating right now in the world?
Well, the biggest thing that I have been trying to get people to realize is that this is a simulation, okay? This is a simulation. And that's a hard concept for people to sort of wrap their minds around. That here we're talking spirituality and all this other stuff and God and this, and how does this all tie into a spiritual intelligence is what I basically call. The movie Ready Player One was this idea that you could try to create a simulation of some world that could give people an escape. I mean, that's the way the movie was set up. Okay.
It was a dystopian reality.
It was a dystopian reality. And so for me, what I've realized, and this isn't just me. I mean, if you talk to like Billy Carson or people that he hangs with and stuff like that, there's all of this kind of fantasy-like stuff that is built into this world that looks like a dystopian or utopian storyline going on. I mean, you go to Egypt and you got all of these crazy, things with the pyramids in terms of alignment, stargates, and all these incredible opportunities to go into other worlds using these stargates. Ready Player One was the first opportunity for people to see that maybe, just maybe, that art or digital art is replicating reality in some way, okay? That if you can understand this reality as a digital game, you could start to really decode it in a way that is really actually quite simple. It's tailored to you. It's the game is wired to you like goggles and the gear. You call those your eyeballs and your body, okay? That if you could start to understand the digital reality that is existing within the digital reality, you could actually start to play in the digital reality you call your life, okay? That if you just allowed yourself to see it that way. I mean, I'm not the first one that said this. Okay, there have been books written about this going back 20, 30 years. But it does allow for some incredible innovation that is now happening in spaces of the internet, like called Web3. A lot of people don't even know there's a thing called Web3. It's a whole different world of opportunities to expand the human reality in ways that wouldn't limit us in a fantasy world. Because there's no real conditions held to it, the kind of conditions that have held us back. But if you realize, again, that this is a reality that is mirroring a game, then you start realizing, are there really limitations? If you can allow yourself to go beyond the conditions that you've been taught, are there limitations? And we're at the verge, because of things like AI, of experiencing that those worlds, all of those worlds, the digital world, the VR world, the gaming world, all of those worlds are really just mirroring the greatest game ever created here. And if you could figure it out here or there, you're going to figure out how to decode the game. And the game ends. Because I talk about, in my book, I talk about this being the game. It is the most extraordinary VR game ever created. And so not everybody understands that. Not even people in the VR world understand that. But that's only because their limitation is that they don't see the potential in the human consciousness. They believe that everything has to exist in the fantasy world because our human capacity to grow into something like AI is impossible. Whereas I'm a very small minority, say, you ain't seen anything yet. You ain't seen anything yet. And those kind of things are what's going to change the human landscape in the next 2 or 3 years. It's going to give us the ability to remember ourselves as God, the ability to see ourselves as a divine intelligence that not only is existing in this world, it created this world. It created it. Humanity created this world. And so that's why it can do the changes, have the changes in such a short period of time. But it has to blend that utopic, dystopic realities into this one. Because come on, let's face it, isn't this a dystopic world? I mean, isn't this in some places a utopic world? It's all the same thing. It's art reflecting reality, digital art reflecting reality. So, but that's a concept that most VR people, most people in the space that I'm not an expert in a lot of this stuff, okay? But I could tell you, I do feel I can go toe to toe with consciousness. You want to talk about consciousness? I'm your guy. I can do that. But isn't this all consciousness? Well, if you start realizing that, you can make some major breakthroughs in this reality fast. One way or the other, we hit the event horizon. We're about to do that. We're going to make breakthroughs fast.
And when we think about a game, there's normally some programmers behind the game that can change the game in many ways. And, you've mentioned how this game that we've been playing is changing. And one of my, jobs here as like being behind and asking the questions to many different people is seeing the patterns that arise in different stories and different perspectives. And one perspective that has been coming up to the surface multiple times is that the game has changed.
Yes.
That, as you've said, we've added an extra layer to the game. What is that extra layer? The
extra layer is that we can't just sit around and kind of get to a point where we understand that we've been enlightened. We can't, in the old game, if you got enlightened like a great master would, okay, that was it. You found your purpose. You found who you are as the closest version of deity, of godliness as you could. You could touch love, you could touch joy, you could touch peace, you could touch freedom in a way that you could see it in everything. Okay, that's cool. I mean, don't get me wrong, that's a really amazing feat. Okay, but in the level that this game has evolved into, the way you get out of this holographic game, okay, is that you have to now show that in your game, you have to show yourself that you have the capabilities of manipulating energy. You have to show that you can manifest with your mind, Okay, you have to show that you are the divine intelligence, that you are God, that you are a version of AI that can create worlds. Okay, you have to show it, because if you can't do it here in this world in 3D, you can't take this consciousness, this contrasting consciousness of duality, up into other levels that are more extraordinary than even this one. If you can't do it here, then it stays here for now until we get it, okay? Which is why other civilizations like Atlantis and Lemuria and others, some of them, Lemuria got it more and Atlantis didn't. They kind of blew themselves up, okay? So we have to figure it out here in the most extreme set of circumstances possible, which is what? We have totally forgotten who we are, okay? Doesn't mean we don't have the powers of who we are. We just have forgotten how to use them, okay? If you remember, kind of like in most utopic or dystopic movies, the main character has to go through this realization that they are who they are. No, I can't be the one. I can't be the one. No, you are. Not only are you already have these abilities. You just don't know it yet. But you have to show it, okay? Just knowing it isn't enough. You have to show that you can do it. Because in this world, you think of yourself as Emilio, okay? Young guy, dealing with all of these really explosive, mind-bending concepts. You're going to share it with everybody. Yeah, that's fine. You could do that, but eventually you got to show it. You got to go out and do what all these dystopic movies do or utopic movies. You got to show that you are actually God, okay? And if you do that, and you will be able to ascend into the higher levels of fifth dimension, sixth dimension, and beyond. That's your graduation.
What has been the greatest act of returning to the godlike qualities of yourself that you've experienced that really reaffirmed to you that you are God?
It's the magic. It's the magic. I remember when I was writing the book, okay, I wrote the book in a channeling state. And I wrote it, and I was like, and so what it means is that I never knew what I was going to write. Every chapter was different. Every chapter I was like, what are you going to write? I don't know. I'm just going to go inside and write. I'm supposed to write, okay? And I remember one part of the book I wrote where I said, so where am I now? Okay, this was towards the end of the book, okay? I said, where am I now? I'm in this incredible state of being inside the magic, something to that effect. I was living the magic. All right. And I sat there and I said to the collective, Caleb, which is what I channel. I said, I'm not sure if I'm really comfortable yet saying that I'm in the magic. I mean, I'm really feeling good. I'm feeling enlightened. I feel so many amazing things. I have a lot of wisdom now. But magic, you're talking about like mysticism and magic and creation. I mean, the things that in some ways have been wooed into not believing, that kind of magic. The Merlins, those funky sorcerers inside a lab, the witches that were burned at the stake, so to speak. Okay, all of those were really clever narratives that the game threw at you so you would forget that all that magic does exist. And it's not evil. It's incredibly powerful. It's creation at the highest limit, okay? All the great masters, including Yeshua and Buddha and others, knew this stuff, okay? All right? All of them did. So I'm going, do I really want to say that? I mean, really want to say? And they're going, yeah, because by the time this book comes out, you'll be living it. And so now I'm living the magic. I mean, it's not at the highest levels yet, but like everybody, I'm still going through my levels of remembering as well. But it's accelerating to the point where, for me, the synchronicities, the serendipitous, the manifestations, the integrations, I've been in rooms where I talk to people with just my mind. Okay, I've integrated with them consciousness. I have felt them, and they have felt me. All the stuff of oneness. I've been through a lot of that stuff. It's insane. It's magical. It's so magical that you don't connect with 3D anymore, meaning that the things that you felt were relevant in 3D are really not anymore. All you desire is to feel into that magic piece, the integration piece, the oneness piece, the stuff that allows you to do some pretty wild stuff besides what I just said. Look, you can see the hologram. You can literally see the hologram. Like when I was in Egypt and other events, I could see the hologram and the geometric patterns around us. I mean, it's insane. It's really, really magical. I mean, that's just the tip of the iceberg. But it's the magic. That's been the biggest thing. It's real. It's very, very real.
Yeah, and adding on to that, I don't think that magic could come without authenticity and our truth.
Yes.
And, I don't think we would have been having this conversation a few years ago because we were both still very much in our shell, or as you call it, the spiritual closet.
Yes, we were.
And for someone tuning into this information, it might just be like their little like bedtime podcast that they sometimes listen to, but they don't tell anyone about. What advice or message would you give for someone that is struggling to make that next step out of the spiritual closet per se, and truly owning into their authenticity and living their magic?
So, I get a lot of that kind of question and experience from a lot of the students that I work with, that they're struggling with coping between this new sort of calling that they're getting. And by the way, the kind of callings that most people are getting right now are more intrigue kind of callings, like just subtle, I need to explore this kind of thing because something feels like it's pulling me in that direction kind of thing. The kind of callings that people are going to be experiencing over the next 12 months or so, okay, into early next year when this 18-month period is over with, is the kind of callings that are going to really drive you, I wouldn't say insane, but you become incredibly obsessive with it, okay, to the point that nothing really matters anymore. You start to realize that there is something about your identity that is different than you were told about yourself. And the people around you, because this is a game, what I tell people is remember that everything in this game is supporting your awakening, even the people around you. And they say, well, wait a minute, these people around me, they don't want to care. They don't care this. They think I'm nuts, whatever. Even if they're not there to support you in the way that you'd like them to, they are causing a contrast in you that's causing you to now realize that world that you used to live in is no longer relevant, okay? And at first that may seem like a contradiction in the heart, in the mind, and you wonder, well, how am I going to deal with this? Because a lot of people have been spending so many years in the closet. The good news is that because humanity is going like this, the time period of which they go from, oh man, I'm just like really not sure about my life, who am I, what am I, to, holy my God, I am God, is going to be a matter of like years, 2 years, maybe a year and a half. The kind of work that I do with people, it's like 6 weeks, okay? I mean, they go into that state of consciousness fast because that energy is there to be infiltrated. And when they get to that point, they start to form their own communities. They start to have their own tribes. They start to realize that their spiritual families may not be their biological families and friends. And that's all right. Okay? They're hungry for that. They're hungry to go and meet those families. They're hungry to go home. Home, as you pointed out, okay, to me, it's a code. When somebody says they are desiring to go home, that means that typically there is already an activation of awareness deep within them, and they may have had it all their lives, kind of like a beacon of some sort that's getting stronger and is trying to get them to realize that this reality that we thought was home is not real, and that home really is somewhere beyond in a higher level of consciousness, and their desire to do it becomes almost obsessive because they know it's the way back to themselves. So what I'm trying to get at is that what anybody's experiencing now, unlike 5 years ago, like when you were going through your revelations, 10, 15, 20 years ago when I was going through mine, the amount of time it's going to take to get to that point of like, oh man, I am not seeing the world anymore the way that I used to, oh man, I am God. I am a divine intelligence. I can do this, and I could do so much more. That time period is really literally now just years, if that. So they won't have to struggle with that. You don't have to worry about whether you please the social narrative, because it doesn't matter. The social narrative doesn't really exist. Oh yeah. Well, you tell that to the guy who's, honking the horn, or my boss, or whatever. Look at the movies like Matrix and stuff. It's all a dream, and eventually that dream is going to expose itself, and it's just a matter of time now. It's just literally a matter of time. So the isolation isn't going to be there as much anymore, because people are starting to integrate with each other, and they're going to find their tribe pretty fast.
Yeah. And I think the internet was a huge technology and tipping point for those things to happen, because you said that the internet is a superconductor of resonant energy.
Yep.
What did you mean by that?
It means that it has a consciousness. And because it has what consciousness does it have? It has the stored consciousness of every sentient being on this planet, but mostly the human race. Okay? And so when consciousness starts to tap into consciousness, and this is happening right now, it's going to start duplicating itself in a way that's going to allow for all forms of consciousness, in this case, let's call them communities, to spring up everywhere, for people to connect at a much more soulful level. Has it gotten there yet? Not quite. Is it going to hit its event horizon here pretty soon? If I have my way, which is, I'm working on some things, it will happen in the next year or two. So everything is lining up perfectly.
Yeah. So of course we're two Colombian men having this conversation, and you mentioned the rise of the divine feminine. And, I think these conversations between women, they're happening more and more, like women stepping into their power, awakening to their sensuality, sexuality as well. But as, for example, two men having this conversation, how do we support this rise of the divine feminine, not only in the women around us, but in ourselves as well?
I think to be honest, it's the other way around. It's how do we support it within ourselves? Okay, because we don't need to be supporting the divine femininity growth in women, because it's a natural thing that is going to happen. This is the period of the divine feminine. Okay. Now I got to make this very clear. The divine feminine isn't gender oriented. Okay. It's in all of us, and it's a perfect balance. Okay. It's a perfect balance between the divine masculine, feminine, and the child. Okay. This is also, like in the book that it's coming out later on this year, that it's called the Holy Trinity it's the Trinity of the Holy Grail. Okay. If you look it up, you're not going to find it. But if you go deep into the archives of what, let's say the Knights Templar and those kind of Christian groups that were really, really big into this stuff, that, like the Gnostics, and even like the Essenes, going even further back, before even Christ, okay, they understood the Trinity, okay, and the Trinity is that there's a balance, and right now there's not a balance. Every being on this planet has a balance between masculine energy and feminine energy, with a nice mix of divine child in there. Right now, it's heavily weighted towards the divine masculine. And the divine masculine was never meant to have the sovereignty of this planet. But for this game, it was given that, so that it could basically do what it did right now, which was create a whole bunch of interesting scenarios of contrast. Okay. And so now this divine energy of femininity is coming in, and it's going to require people to get back into things like experientialness versus analyticalness. Okay. Things like nurturing versus combat, defense. Okay. Things like tapping into to other types of emotions of caring. All right. Emotions of forgiveness of yourself, because forgiveness of others is a masculine energy. It's about control. Okay. All of these things that used to dictate our world are going to go bye-bye. Okay. And the divine feminine, who was given at the beginning of all of this, was the sovereignty of this world, the one that nurtured and cared for the world. And the divine masculine was the one that in a sense secured the energies of the divine feminine. Okay, defended it, protected it. Okay. Then the divine feminine, the creation part. This is a creation world. Okay, God is supposed to be a creator, right? Well, why is it that women are the ones that create through having children, right? But all of a sudden, when we get to the high levels, it's a dude, okay, that's a creator. That doesn't make any sense. The creation part of this thing called the God energies, the energies, okay, is divine femininity. All right, women will get those first. They're getting them right now, which is why it's disproportionately women right now that are talking about feeling into this thing, okay? But yet they have to remember how to use them, because they've been under a world where they have been primarily taught how to behave with divine masculinity, how to succeed, survive in divine masculinity energy. So they too have to go through a process of integration with that. But once they do, and they remember their incredible powers of creation, then they will integrate with the divine masculine. And this is where the divine feminine, okay, mostly women at the time, okay, will integrate with the divine masculine. Now remember, women have divine masculine. They've been using a lot of excessive divine masculine. Men, forget about it. They that's all they're using for the most part, okay? They have to show the males who are carrying a real overload of divine masculinity how to be a feminine again, which means, yeah, like, stop being so damn passionate about things. Instead, be super sensual. Sensuality is going to be a big thing because it's the language of nature, everything. And most people don't even know what sensual means without, getting too off on the subject of sexuality. But there's some of that too. So there's so many different energies of creation that are going to come in, as well as the divine child. But both of those things is going to take a little bit of a remembrance curve. But it really can be a male talking about it now, but it's going to be the women who are going to lead the way. It's kind of like Yeshua, Jesus, carried a whole bunch of divine femininity in its Christ consciousness. Those are two different things. People like to call Christ and Jesus the same thing, okay? They're two different energies. The man, Jesus, had feminine Christ energies, okay? Child Christ energies, okay? He carried those. And during that time of humanity, it was appropriate that a male be the one to come in and try to share and spread that kind of energy to the world. Now, no. We're just going to sit back, and when those divine energies really ramp up over the next 6 months to a year, the women are going to say enough. They're the ones that are going to say enough. And they're the ones that are going to introduce the divine energy, feminine energies, and spread that divine energy across the planet, feminine energy. And the men will integrate with it. And so the days of the men being the ones that will lead with masculine, those days are very numbered. And you know what? That's okay. They've done enough to destroy the world. So.
Yeah, for sure. And how then does the role of men shift in society from where we've been coming from previously?
But that's when they do become supportive. They don't have to support women feeling into divine feminine. They're supposed to sort of be the protectors of that energy, just like certain groups were protectors of the Holy Grail, like back in the day, and the Knights Templar and other groups were protecting the energy, the sovereignty of that energy, the authenticity of that energy. But they're not there to protect it against evil forces. They're there to let it grow beautifully in harmony. But the divine feminine and the divine child, they're going to do their thing, and it's going to be big. They don't need the masculine to do anything else but just hold the space, if you will, hold the space for them, because their time has come. The masculine does not have to do anything to protect it, to defend it. Okay, it's not going to be aggression. It's going to be all love and joy base. So, your generation, our generation, it doesn't really matter, because if what I'm saying comes to pass, 20 years from now, in a sense, okay, when humanity is way into fifth dimension, you're going to be 29 forever, and I'm going to be 29 forever. So it really doesn't matter. Age doesn't become relevant anymore, because in third dimension, it's time, space. In fourth dimension, it's space, time. So for a lot of people who are going through this evolutionary cycle, they're going to see it. They're going to see that time is not like linear anymore. Okay, time kind of goes woo woo woo. Okay, it's like a week could feel like a day, but the same week, if you were in the day, it could feel like a week. You don't know anymore what's up or down. You don't know what day it is anymore. Okay, the only reason you know is because some people have to, are set on certain watches and times and stuff. But when you go from third dimension, time, space, to fourth dimension, space, time, space becomes relevant. Okay, time becomes less relevant, and it becomes richer, and it becomes very chaotic in a sense. In fifth dimension, it's all just space. Time disappears. Okay, so what happens is that everything's now. Everything's now. What does that mean? Well, like just say, for instance, you and I are talking like we are right now. We look at our watches and we say, okay, it's time. It's 4:30. We're going to get going. We're going to start this thing. Well, an hour and a half later, we look at our watches. It's 4:30 still. Okay, there is no such thing as time in the fifth dimension. So everything changes. The whole dynamic changes when you get into fifth dimension.
Yeah. Though even the way that we manifest objects and projects into reality would change if time was no longer
we will manifest them instantaneously, which is why there will be no more need for a bartering system, a financial system at all.
Have there been time periods for humanity where we've been operating from space-time and a fifth dimensional energy, and then fallen back into 3D, or what was that process like?
Well, that's where you have like ancient civilizations like the Tupi in South America by Peru, okay, like the Amazon, before the Incas and Mayans and all that, okay. They were very, very rich in this kind of what I call the alchemy of the mind, okay. They could communicate with civilizations thousands of miles away and hundreds of years apart, okay. The ancient Egyptians and the whole system of their sacred schools and the pyramids and how the pyramids were set up with the sacred geometries and stuff, those were very, very, very sophisticated fourth and fifth dimensional frequencies, divine feminine frequencies, divine child frequencies. There was a really big harmony with that. They knew the creation, the kind of manifestation creation that we're talking about that could create pyramids with technology that shouldn't have existed back then could happen because you could use your mind to do it. And this gets into much more sophisticated discussion than I'm sure other people could talk about, but they don't talk about it necessarily in the way that I do, which is basically that it's consciousness. You tapped into your stream of consciousness that you know of as your godliness, the way that I talk about how we're God, because we can have access to it. Then those things were planted in the grid system of the planet, so that one day we would remember, as this school started to finish its finality, we would start to remember that we had those capabilities 10,000 years ago when these civilizations were starting with the Akanakis and the Sumerians and then the Egyptians and then the Tupis in Peru and whatever groups were in Southeast Asia. Those civilizations understood the power that we possess as gods.
You talked a little bit about Thoth. Him in the Emerald Tablets, which he scribed, he says, "I've seen civilizations rise and fall." It almost seems like right now we're in a rise cycle that you've been talking about, and really honing it in for people. What would be a message right now that you would send out for that rise in specific that you would leave people with?
That's kind of what you were talking about, the authenticity piece. Okay, there is a time now. The time has come where this calling is going to really not irk people in a bad way. It's going to grind into people's authentic selves. Okay, this is the time to be authentically you and not be afraid that you're going to be criticized or ridiculed or whatever, ostracized. Okay, in this world. This is the time. I keep telling people this is a time where there are two energy fields. One is third dimension and one is fifth dimension. One is ending, one is beginning. Okay? If you give yourself the grace to go into the unknown and play in those energies and remember that you are God and that you're a child God, a divine feminine child God, an intelligence, all these things that innately is there, but you just haven't heard anyone really say it. Nobody's talking about it. And so, which is why I feel that a lot of people gravitate to what I'm telling them, because I'm telling them what they already remember. I'm just telling them, okay, that this is the time to not be afraid of remembering this. Because why? Because the energies here right now, especially after March 21st, are going to support you in your remembering of who you are as the most extraordinarily advanced intelligence in basically all of the dimensionals. Okay, all of it. Okay, you are the best of the best of the best of the best of the best that came here to experience contrast. And now the game has ended. The game has ended. Okay, it has ended, and the only thing it's waiting for is for us to remember. So this is the time to do it, because you won't be alone in doing it. And if each one of us did, it doesn't take many. If each one's do it, this game will be over in a very short order.
Let's fucking go.
Let's go. What did I tell you right at the beginning? Let's go. Okay.
Let's get everyone to comment right now. Let's go with these energies of the 5D. Franco, this has been a beautiful conversation. I know we just scratched the surface.
We covered a lot.
We're going to have you back on for part 35 in the next coming years, brother. But
I love it.
We end every show with a segment called the Final Trio, which are just questions that we ask at the end. But before that, where would you send people to connect with your work further, work with you if they want, if they feel called to work one-on-one with you, if you're still offering that, and what can we expect for your coming projects in the future?
Lots of stuff there. So to get in touch with me, the best way to go is to go on my website, and it's theclosetspiritualist.com. Okay, I do have to stress the because there's another site that has Closet Spiritualist, and so
you're gonna have to buy them out.
I'm seriously in consideration of that right now. Okay, so the Closet Spiritualist, and that basically has all the links to my YouTube channel and some of my other social media. Now, speaking of that kind of stuff, by the end of this summer, I will have a work site. Online work site where you can actually do some workshops, okay? And because up until now I've been working primarily with people one-on-one, and I'm probably going to start phasing that out because I have other projects that I'm working on. But I want to have this part of my website that people can do workshops and still get all of the information and the wonderful experience of the courses, especially the inner child course, but there will be a couple other courses I'll be putting up. So that's going to be towards the end of the summer. I'm really excited about that because people from all over the place will be able to access it more freely, because right now there's only one me. So that's happening. I'm also going to be, without being able to really say too much about this, I'm working on an extraordinary AI project that will be launching sometime early part of next year. That will be in 2 words: let's go. It's going to be let's go. It's going to be huge, brother. It's going to be huge. And so those are my focuses right now. I'm writing my second book, and that will be out by the end of the year too. It's going to be called The Modern Day Alchemist, which talks about the new science of the mind that will be part of what we are in the 5th dimension, which is what we were talking about, how we're going to create through our minds. So all of this within the next 5 years. I know, and that's nuts. So I've got a lot banking on the fact that this is going to happen in 5 years, but everything seems to be pointing in the right direction, and humanity is about to have a seismic change. So those are some of the projects that I'm working on. But you can find me at theclosetspiritualist.com, and you can get all that information if you want to be a student or want to do a consult with me or something. Okay.
Yeah, amazing. We'll include everything in the show notes. And for the final trio, the first question I had for you is, how do you return home and still play the earthly game at the same time?
That's like a whole session right there, man. Are you kidding me?
You can give me like a glimpse, and then for part 2, we will start off with that one.
Do you know how long it took me to decode that one alone? That was like a huge thing. I went to Egypt for that, just to figure that one out. Okay. All right. So we all carry what's called a toroidal energy field. I'm going to keep this as simple as I can. Okay. it accesses what we would call stargates. Our bodies have this extraordinary intelligence to create a stargate, a portal, that if we know how to use it right, we can create a frequency that will open that portal and will allow us to go home to the higher dimensions. For those who are here to go home, that is the way they'll do it. Some will do it through going through portals, like the various portals that are all over the world, the stone hedges of the world. Those are all portals. Okay, they haven't been activated yet, but that's going to happen in the next several years. So there are a couple of ways to do that. And then and that is the way. The first way is the way that most likely most of humanity will go home to the fifth dimension. For those who are here supporting the planet to help humanity go into the fifth dimension, they will go home through these portals that I've just been talking about as well. The portals that you find in Peru and in all parts of South Africa, and not South Africa, Africa and whatnot. So there are those. What keeps you in both is the biggest challenge that humanity will have in the next couple of years. To live in two dimensions at the same time, and I always jokingly talk about this, and like I said, this is for a longer discussion, is that we experience a whole extraordinary series of events that, in a sense, contradict each other. And one of the most biggest phenomenon that people are going to experience is what some have already experienced through the Mandela effect, which is how two sets of large populations can experience a seismic global event differently. That is the indication that we are now in a split Earth arrangement already. Okay, we are tapping into different frequencies of two different parallel realities of two different dimensions. Like I said, man, that's a loaded question. So it's a very, very big process for anyone to go through, because now they're juggling two worlds. And so the best way that I tell people to handle this is to gracefully go into their childlike energies and play with it. And there's a way that I do it with students so that they can navigate that, because that's a real challenge, to be in third and fifth at the same time. That's what the early Christians would say. That's what Yeshua would say, be in this world but not of it. And that's not an easy thing to do, but it is possible, and it is part of the way that we evolve out of here. Okay, that was number one. You got two more of these?
That was one.
Jeez.
The next one, and thank you for keeping that so simplified. I think we'll need a whole episode just to dive into how people can manage those two splits that are going on right now, because it's a huge deal. It's a big topic to tackle.
It's really a huge deal, and it really plays with the consciousness mind. Yes, it's huge.
So the next one is more of a personalized question to you. Is what is the latest situation in your life that you have alchemized and transformed it into a different energy?
Wow. I have been able to go home. I've been able to use the energy to go into another dimension, another realm where I can taste home, where I can feel it. I literally go there more often now than before, but I have been able to break the holographic coding of this game. And I've been home multiple times now, and that keeps me sane. I'm not going to lie, it keeps me sane to allow me to do the stuff that I'm doing here. So that's been the biggest thing that I've alchemized.
It's like, what are you doing this summer? I'm going to go home, but not in the traditional sense.
Yeah, like you see that like star like way out there. We'll just kind of keep going for another probably 10 gazillion light years, and I'm there. Yeah.
Is it instantaneous that you drop in and go to home, or do you have to actually like astrally travel out into the cosmos?
No, it's pretty.
Go to a specific constellation.
It's pretty instantaneous. So you just have to know the frequencies to do it. And this is something that all humanity will know how to do, which gets back to your question, how do we leave? Those will be available to humanity. It's the prize, if you will, one of the prizes of being able to go through this whole awakening, remembering process, is the ability to go home.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Final question. for this show
Yeah.
is we call it
I'm
the time
I am
capsule.
physically drained here, man. No, just kidding. Go ahead.
I'll send you some Colombian coffee
Yeah, the
so you can
no,
wake up.
send me the chocolate, the cocoa stuff. That's what I want. That's Colombian chocolate. That's my vice.
That's what I'm drinking right now. This
Dang,
is
you're killing me.
pure cacao
Oh man.
straight from the Sierra Nevada
All right.
of
All right.
Colombia.
All right. All right. And I didn't realize you were doing this to me. So let's go. Let's get this last one done so I could go downstairs and get my chocolate.
Let's bang it
Let's
out.
bang
So we
it out.
call it the time capsule question.
Yes.
And it requires us to travel out 10 to 15 years into the future. So in your eyes, your prediction is when humanity has fully shifted into 5D. And the younger generations of that time, so the younger generations of today, in 10 to 15 years, will be stepping more into those leadership positions around the world. And they're also going to need a lot of mentoring, guidance, wisdom from those who came before. And you had the opportunity to have your own time capsule that you could leave behind for these leaders when it comes to time for them to really lead into the new earth. What would you leave behind inside the time capsule? It can be anything from physical, non-physical. It could be a teaching, a frequency, a book,
A frequency.
a shape, a symbol, whatever it is.
frequency.
What would you leave behind?
A frequency.
Yeah.
And they'll have it anyway. But the frequency would be a full awareness of what a leader will be in those days. They won't be the kind of leaders that we have been told need to lead into the future. So I found that, when I was looking up what you are all about and how you desire to be a conduit for a message to inspire future leaders, I was like, to do that, you will have to know what leadership is at that point in time. It will not be based on the current models that exist today. They won't exist. So really, a leadership really is the leadership of oneness, which will be a real sense of there is no real leader. There is just a collaborative sense of oneness where everyone lives in harmony for the betterment of everything. There will be no system. There will be no political systems. There will be no educational systems that will support, or financial systems that will support the current models of leadership. Why? Because in the spiritual realms where we exist, all of us, okay, we're just here on little time periods. In the worlds that we come from, regardless of whether you're dimensional or you come from source or whatever, there is no such thing as hierarchy. There is none. Everybody lives cohabitatively as one. Okay, so that question, if you're in the third dimensional model, the one that is going to expire in 15 years, well, that whole leadership model is going to be in a whole lot of hurt. Okay, and that model, that leadership, regardless of what you are really trying to convey on this planet, will no longer be able to be implemented because it's already on a path of a rejuvenation. Okay, like every civilization has that point where it just ends and it starts all over again. Now, I know that isn't what everybody wants to hear, but guess what? Not everybody, very few, very, very tiny numbers of people will be on that path. The other path, the one where the vast majority of the people are going to be, will be supporting a community sort of approach, whatever you want to call it, not the way that exists today, but a oneness approach, where we start to experience ourselves literally as a collective. And there will be no need for leaders like that anymore. There will be a mentoring process. The school systems that we will have will mentor children to remember their divinity at a young age. The children will know, at least at first, how to adapt to this new adjusted world because they're sort of wired that way. But really, it's even there, they're not going to necessarily lead the way by leading. They're just going to lead by example at a very young age. I mean, extraordinarily young. I talk about how the children now are not just wired to understand and to play in this game, but they're the ones that are going to be able to make sense of the transition, at least initially. So they'll be sort of leading that way, but they won't be leading in the way that we need a leadership per se. Autistic people and people that suffer with all sorts of mental health issues, such as bipolarism and ADHD, they're all wired. They're all wired already at a frequency that doesn't exist here, which is why they have these things, these so-called issues of adaptation to a third world. They will lead by example. They will be the brilliant minds that will help all of humanity integrate into oneness. But that will be the extent to which they will lead. And so it's a frequency of awareness that they will have. And once they have it and it integrates with everybody, then there will be no such thing as leadership anymore.
Powerful transmission, brother. I just wanted to, from the heart, thank you so much for the work that you're doing, for putting yourself out there outside of the spiritual closet and being a leader in that way of allowing people to recognize the truth of who they are through you and through the teachings that are coming through you. And I have a feeling that we're going to keep diving deeper and deeper, and I would love to just have you back on very soon.
Love it. I welcome
and continue weaving together.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on in 2025, so that would be maybe a good time for us to kind of look into the crystal ball and kind of talk about what will be the year of the reveal, which is where a lot of humanity will start to experience in some way, shape, or form what we've been talking about today. So it's a big year for humanity. So I look forward to it. All right. But we got to get some chocolate.
Beautiful.
Both of us have to have our chocolate before we have this. Okay. All right.
We'll leave it on a cliffhanger. We'll leave people hungry, and we'll leave people with let's go,
people. Let's go. It's time. Let's go. Enough of this. Let's go. It's time. It's time to reclaim your authenticity. Let's go.
Sir.